Hi everyone, this is Liberty and I'm here with my colleague Arthur and we're going to discuss Mike Long's 2015 book, Second Language Acquisition and Task-Based Language Teaching. And today we're going to talk about chapters 6 and 7 of the book. So chapter 6 is about identifying target tasks. It's more than 50 pages long. And I was not expecting to find it so interesting. And I was expecting just to skim over it. But it was actually because I think Long has such good insights, even into very specific areas of ESP, which I've never thought about. But the way he ties it to language teaching more broadly was really engaging.
Some of it's quite difficult as well. And that's nice. It's nice to read something that really challenges you. Like I learned about DNA and enzymes, which is not something I normally think about. And I learned about how to be a museum curator. So
Right.
there's quite a lot going on in that chapter, and
Yes.
I think it's really good that he goes into the level of detail that he does.
Yes. It's like being taken on a world tour of different professions and settings that you would never really hear about otherwise.
And linking that to language, making that strong link between professions and language use, which we've been thinking about training on the Delta, because we've been talking about the difference between style and register. The fact that a vicar is being formal when they say, we are gathered here today, and a doctor is being formal when they say what seems to be the problem. But a vicar would never say what seems to be the problem, and a doctor would never say we are gathered here today. So language is inherently tied to professions, almost like a code. And I thought there were quite a lot of hints of that in the chapter.
Right, like very specific terminology used in the army, in the US Army.
That's right. That's right. And the interesting point about how you would need to do something 100,000 times or 100 million times for there to be a burden of, for it to reach a certain burden of provability in genetics. I thought that was very interesting as well. That a number could seem extremely high to a layman, but if you were a geneticist, the same number would be the bare minimum number of times that something would need to be observed for it to be for it to be worth theorizing about.
Was that about provability? I thought that was about the rate of mutation.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I found that really confusing, and I did not know what he meant by that.
I think because he described it as a type of hedging, which I did. I'm afraid that that's
right.
Maybe a sleep deprivation. But,
okay, wait, this is interesting. Okay,
Mike Long's not for kids, everyone.
So page 3, page 131. And so it was about a sentence. I think he was talking about looking at language teaching for students studying biology.
Yes. And
analyzing scientific papers. And so there was a passage from a scientific article about DNA. And it said, it has been estimated, for example, that a bacterial gene may be duplicated over 100 million times before there is even a 50% chance that it will have been altered. So that's a hedge. But I don't know why it's a hedge or what it means or...
Yeah, that was very difficult to understand. It's about the slow rate of genetic mutation, I think, right? But it was extremely difficult to understand, and that's why I enjoyed reading the chapter, because it took me to zones that I'm not comfortable in, and that's what all good books should do, I think.
Absolutely, yes. It's a challenging book. And one of the challenges of this book is that it contains a lot of abbreviations, so I've made a list of the abbreviations, and I would like to, if you are feeling competitive, I would like to compete with you to remember the abbreviations.
Okay.
So if you know the abbreviation, you get 1 point.
Right.
And if you don't know, then I get 1 point.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
You're going to win.
Okay. So number 1 is NA.
Needs analysis.
Yes. And I think this is the chapter where, just for me, the very concept of a needs analysis has really been unpacked. It's really opened my eyes to how much there is to the concept of needs analysis, because I think, coming from my context of being in a school teaching general English, it's just this thing we do. It's a page of questions that we go through with a student on the first day. And then we sort of tailor the course a little bit to them, but basically they do the same course from a course book. But it turns out that actually there is a huge literature on needs analysis. Long himself has written or edited a book on needs analysis.
It's quite nice also to, I mean, the last time we talked about needs analysis, you came up with some really excellent ideas that challenged me, that festered, and I was thinking about the idea that, you know, it's very difficult to do needs analysis with young learners. The idea that students often don't want to do needs analysis because they think it's the teacher's job to know what they want. And I went away thinking, well, that doesn't sound good. But then, sure enough, Mike Long said the same thing in this chapter. He said that often students do expect the teacher to just know what they need and not have to articulate it. And I thought that was interesting that he basically agreed with you on that.
Yes. He agreed with me, and he solved the problem, because he pointed out that it's much more objective than just asking the learner what they want to do, just using the teacher's language knowledge. It's actually more about understanding the tasks that the learner is going to do.
I love the way that he tied needs analysis in with things like detailed job descriptions. I thought that was excellent. I think that, you know, generally speaking, we need much more of that in English language teaching. We do maybe undervalue the English for specific purposes market, and how many people there are who, whether they realize it or not, actually do have very specific language needs.
Yes, yeah, and I think a lot of the objections that I brought up in our last conversation hold in today's world. But I think Long's ideas are the future, and I think there needs to be a cultural change where anyone learning a language does focus more on the tasks that they need to do, and not on the list of grammar points that they want to learn or the list of words they want to learn.
Yeah. I think, I mean, you might want to shut me down here because I might be veering off, but I've always felt uncomfortable with this as an IELTS examiner. I think it's a great test, actually. I think that it's a really good speaking test, and it's a really good writing test for general English. But what's it being used for? It's being used to see if people are ready to do a biology degree at York University or an accountancy degree at Lancaster University. And if you could have 7 or 8 IELTS tests with a more generic, more of a focus on this specific, less generic and more specific focus, it would be a very good thing. But it would also be a very expensive thing. And IELTS is what we have. You know, a lot of Michael Long's ideas are excellent, but they're inconvenient for institutions, I think. Yeah. They cost money and time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think so. One more objection, which I don't think has been answered yet, is someone who simply wants to learn a language to improve their general prospects, or because they find it fun to learn a language.
And I think this is an idea that's worth giving a lot of value to, because English is certainly being sold that way. I remember attending Cam Tiso in Cambodia, where learning English was intrinsically tied in the narrative of that whole conference. It was tied in with social mobility and economic mobility. The idea that learning English was something that was good for your social and economic mobility is very easy for people to understand and probably true. And if that's as far as you've got when you decide, I'm going to learn English, then maybe you don't have very well defined needs. Maybe you're just like, yeah, as you say, I just want to learn it to improve my lot in life. But then I think it's the responsibility of teachers to quickly say, okay, so what are the arenas in which you could use English in your country? You're going to be in Phnom Penh for the next 3 or 4 years, because it's where you're from, it's where you live. Where can you work where English will help you? So maybe it'd be the hotel industry. And that's where you start getting into the more specific needs analysis that Mike Long's talking about in the chapter, I guess. So maybe teachers need to help give people a bit of direction in terms of their English language learning.
I know lots of learners say that they just want to learn English so that they can travel more easily and socialize more easily. So do you think in the future that will be its own area of ESP, or that will go, or that will be a niche area?
To be honest, I think that's what general English is, because course books are so, I mean, the themes in course books are so limited. There's only so far you can go in a course book without becoming inappropriate for a particular market. You can't say anything about religion. You can't say much about politics. You can't say much about gender or sexual orientation. So what have you got left? You've got travel, you've got the family, and you've got sports. And so I think that
no parsnips.
No parsnips. Yeah, that's right. No parsnips. So you've got food, travel, entertainment, and family, really.
And even family is a bit.
Yeah, and so that's why there are so many lessons about taking holidays and modes of transport. I mean, you think that everyone has an awful lot of money if you read the themes in a general English course book. It seems very focused on middle class people who go on holiday quite a lot.
Or people with really great jobs, or guy who works in a lighthouse.
But but linking that back to task-based language teaching, I think there are quite a lot of tasks that are useful there. I think finding a suitable place on Airbnb is a task. It's a very authentic task. Lots of our learners at the school have done it to study here at IH Bangkok, and they probably did it largely in their own language. But I think learning how to do it in English also helps, because you might be traveling somewhere where there aren't many people who speak your language there, so you don't have access to the reviews, or the reviews are poorly translated. So I think it is useful to do these tasks in English. Yeah. Is it its own ESP area? Possibly. Yeah, possibly it become one.
Okay, next abbreviation, EOP and VESL.
Pass.
This is English for occupational purposes and vocational English as a second language. And I don't know if there's a difference between those two. They sound the same.
What I'm interested in, I suppose, is the difference between English for occupational purposes and English for specific purposes, because I've always thought of them as being roughly the same thing.
Yeah.
So, because I've always used the term ESP.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just wondering whether they are completely synonymous abbreviations, which wouldn't surprise me, because we've got too many abbreviations in TEFL.
Right. Well, maybe it's to exclude academic English. But anyway, yeah, I'm fairly sure it means the English used by factory workers or pilots or workers in the tourist industry, as opposed to more academic.
Yeah, because Highland talks about English EGAP and ESAP, English for general academic purposes and English for specific academic purposes. And I've never really thought of English for academic purposes as part of ESP, because I was in the EAP zone when I was working in universities. And I always thought of ESP as being more what Mike Long here is calling EOP. Yeah. So terminology is a bit of a minefield, and I'm not very good at it. Anyway, pass. You win that one.
Okay, fine. So it's 1-1 now. So next one is DOT.
my direction of travel is not good. I'm not going to win this one either.
This is Dictionary of Occupational
Occupational titles, right?
Right. So this is a reference work which describes it. It's a reference work of professions and describes all of the tasks that each profession has to do. So he gives the example of a secretary and a list of all the things a secretary has to do. So it's a key source for people doing needs analyses.
Yeah, and that was really interesting to read. And while I'm no good at remembering acronyms and abbreviations, it was really interesting to read about how breaking down a job description starts to look like a curriculum for a language class. You know, I was reading those roles and responsibilities of someone who worked in a government department, and just thinking, yeah, I could make a lesson out of that. Yeah, I could make a lesson out of that, you know, and just from this list of responsibilities that someone had in their job, thought, yeah, that could quite easily just be a 20-week course.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it had its limitations because it doesn't always reflect exactly what someone might be doing in their particular role. But yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. Okay, the next abbreviation, PSA and TSA.
Nah.
Okay, listeners, you should remember this from the chapter 5 discussion. So present situation analysis and target situation analysis. A target situation analysis would be the details about the job or the course or the setting that a learner is going to go to.
Yeah.
So pre-service or pre-education, whereas a present situation analysis would be done with a learner who's already doing the course or already doing the job, and they just want to get better at it. And it comes up in this chapter, it comes up where Long is talking about something called a language audit, which seems similar to a needs analysis.
Yeah.
So it's the process of gathering information about the language needs and existing linguistic resources of an institution or people in an institution or organization. So one example was there was a language audit done of the New Zealand tourism industry, which revealed discrepancies between the importance that people in the industry attached to knowledge of foreign languages and the actual frequency with which foreign languages were used, because it turned out that actually technical skills and knowledge of processes was more important than knowing a foreign language.
Yeah, that's always interesting. And I think one of the things Mike Long talks about is doing a needs analysis of people who are yet to start a course, and doing a needs analysis of people who have already taken the course or who are in the middle of the course, and that you need all of these people to feed into your needs analysis if you're going to negotiate a curriculum. I guess the way people articulate their needs changes as they go through a course of study. So that made complete sense to me. I liked that idea that you would survey people at different stages through the learning process, and try to amalgamate all that data in a needs analysis.
Is that triangulation of sources?
I think so. Yeah.
One example. Yeah. Okay. Next is NSNNS.
So that would be native speaker and non-native speaker, which are problematic terms, but I don't know whether that's a whole other topic, but I try to avoid those terms because they almost become meaningless.
What about NNEST?
Well,
you used that term earlier.
Yeah, native English speaking teacher, non-native English speaking teacher. I mean, I think my problem is the word native.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked about this in the chapter 3 episodes. The term native speaker doesn't describe many real people's situations. So I was born in Malaysia and I had a British dad and I had an Indonesian mum, and many people I think many people defy that distinction.
Yeah.
And even if they don't, like at some point when you have an expert user the distinction is arbitrary.
Yes.
So you've got you've got an accent. Someone's got an accent, but it has no effect on their ability to communicate or the style of what they say or write. Is that is that your?
Well, I think just the amount of time I've spent in Singapore has made me really think quite a lot and quite critically about what native speaker really means. In Singapore, everybody has a native language. It's the language that they speak at home, and everybody has a mother tongue, which confusingly in Singapore means the language you learn at school. So
you wrote an article about this.
Yeah, I did. It's in the
I will link it in the description.
IH journal. I think it's issue 45. It was just before COVID I wrote that, and it was all about how Singapore is extremely problematic in terms of whether people are native or non-native speakers. People have a huge range of English ability in that country, and also they're very plurilinguistic. They know when to use the language in a more precise way, and exactly when to use the language and mix it in with Chinese grammar and mix it in with a bit of Malay and Tamil vocabulary. It's a fascinating place to study what it actually means to be an English speaker. You can be quite a proficient English speaker without being a native speaker. And in Singapore, you can be a native speaker who very rarely uses the full range of English that you know, because so many of the other people that you speak to are using English more as a Creole. It's a fascinating linguistic environment.
What about expert user versus non-expert user?
I prefer that. I find that so much easier because it actually has positive indicators attached to it through the IELTS band descriptors. So in IELTS, an expert user is a band 9, and as a former IELTS examiner, I know exactly what a band 9 speaker and a band 9 writer can do. And so I can look at someone's speaking and look at someone's writing and say, yes, they're an expert user, or they're a proficient user, or they're a good user. And so I prefer, and I find it easier to make sense of someone's language proficiency using IELTS than I do with this term native, non-native.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
So in the context of the chapter, it was just that many of the studies that Long talks about involve interviewing both, I'll put it in inverted commas, native speakers and non-native speakers.
This is where he's talking about getting an understanding of how language is used in different discourse communities, isn't it? How, like in the field of scientific research, how language is used by people involved in that scientific research. So they interviewed non-native members of that community and native members of that community to find out,
I think, how they dealt with texts, and another reason for using native speakers was to control for. I was looking at tasks that people found difficult in their work and focusing on the non-expert users, and then so they also interviewed native speakers to control for. So some tasks are simply difficult to do.
Yes.
And that might not be the focus for people who are still learning English. And then there was also mentioned in chapter 7, there was a study in a work environment in New Zealand. It was focused on new immigrants in New Zealand, and it just revealed their struggle to be accepted by co-workers, because they struggled to make casual conversation, knowing things like the meaning of how are you, and knowing that it's just a greeting and not an inquiry into your health, knowing which sports are popular and knowing what people mean when they say great match on Saturday, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, next is NIH.
Us.
This is National Institute of Health, which is it's a major national center in Maryland, in Washington, D.C., where Mike Lom led a study collecting information from staff about their language needs. And it was
He's
just
been
an
reading this
example.
book so much, he's Mike now. I like that. I think you've earned the right.
Freudian slip, yes. But he led a study collecting information from staff in this institute, and it's an example. He gives it as an example of different methods of collecting information, beginning with semi-structured interviews, then narrowing it down into a questionnaire with closed questions. Okay, shall I move on?
Yeah.
FA.
Oh, that's fine. Awesome.
This is flight attendant.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah.
So
I told you I was terrible with these. Absolutely terrible.
They're very obscure. So he mentioned flight. So he discusses a study about flight attendants from his book. I think it's from his 2005 book on needs analysis.
Yeah.
And it's a great example of triangulation by sources and methods.
Right.
Because so people think that they know what a flight attendant does, because when you're on a flight, you can see the flight attendants all the time. You can hear everything they're saying. And so we think that we know what they need to say and what language they need to use. And so one of the things that Long did was he interviewed both flight attendants and applied linguists and compared what they said about what their jobs are. And there was so he quoted one of the applied linguists in the study. One of the applied linguists he interviewed. This is from page 167. So the applied linguist described flight attendants as like waiters or waitresses in the air. Basically, they give things to you and tell you what you need to do. They're kind of hands that come round and give you things, servo droids. And then when it came to interviewing the flight attendants themselves and looking at the paperwork from the airline and then surreptitiously recording them and just getting a much richer source of information, it turned out that the communication with passengers is actually a very small part of what flight attendants need to do, and by no means the most important part. So it was much more important to know the wording of safety precautions and knowing how to use or describe the equipment. Great example of we all think that we know what they need to say, but actually we don't.
Yeah, that was very interesting to read. That was eye-opening, actually. The whole idea that to gain a full understanding of what something is, you have to talk to multiple sources to work out what the job is, because it's not just about what the job actually is, it's also about how the job is perceived, because in communication those two things are going to interact with each other.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, communication is going to happen between a flight attendant and the applied linguist when the applied linguist takes a flight,
right?
And when anyone else takes a flight. And that's what I find interesting, is that we have communication exists in a zone between what people actually are and what the other person thinks they are. I know we've been talking about ontology and how you think it's quite useless, and I'm really fascinated by it. But just the interplay between who someone is and who someone else thinks they are in a particular role has an effect on communication. It can lead to breakdown in communication. It can lead to successful communication. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think the insider perspective is very important when, if we're thinking about the language that a person in a particular job needs to use.
Yeah.
Then
you would never do a needs analysis for students who wanted to become flight attendants without consulting flight attendants on the language they actually use, or indeed recording them using that language, because we're not always aware of what we say. So I think that's fascinating research, and I think it was really helpful research. Yeah.
Yeah, there was another example of how studies can reveal the discrepancy between the insider and outsider perspective. So I don't know if you remember this is another abbreviation, Center for CEDT,
Yeah.
Center for Electronic Design Technology.
Right.
So, and this was an example, it was an ethnographic study. So I think the researchers actually went into this school, this center, as observers. Yeah, so they went into the center and they did unstructured interviews, and then they evaluated the existing syllabus on the basis of what they'd found out about the students' needs.
Yeah.
And in the observation stage, it turned out that the people doing the study had not understood the importance of I think it was the student seminar, because the staff at the center thought it was really important that the distinction between using this seminar as a progress report for the student and using it as a public defense of technical decisions that they made during the design progress. And so the applied linguists just had not realized the importance of that distinction. And even as observers in an ethnographic study, it didn't quite sink in. And that's even if you're in the situation with the insiders, you can still misunderstand a situation. So yeah, it's I think he's implying that applied linguists tend to rely too much on their outsider intuitions about what's done in a given sector or profession.
Yeah. And I think that also applies often, dare I say it, to applied linguists' understanding of how languages are learned. I think that I'm a bit skeptical. I'm a bit skeptical working in a specific environment, reading research that was done in Quebec, whether how much that research applies to my learners in Bangkok. There seems to be, in linguistics in general, there seems to be this yearning for universal truth, where, and I think Mike Long would definitely agree with this, that if you do research in a particular place, your research will tell you something specific about that place, but it might not tell you very much about this place over here. So I think generally there seems to be a will within applied linguistics to say, oh, this research shows us that something is true everywhere, and it might not be. And I think that what the point you make about applied linguists misunderstanding something because they're not specifically inside that group relates just as much to what we do.
Interesting.
They'd have to come to IH Bangkok and spend time here to test whether the things that they experimented on in Quebec in the early 2000s are still true, wherever true over here, wherever true with this language group, wherever true for the students of this socioeconomic status, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I just think it's much more complicated than just I've done this experiment with this group of people and now I can apply that data to English language learners globally.
Yes. And I think Long would agree with you.
I think he would.
He really prioritizes the perspective of the learner.
And also, I just think that, I mean, we can maybe talk about complexity theory in another podcast, but I'm a big fan of any thinker who embraces things being more complex rather than less complex. I think that the idea that there's this will to sort of simplify everything and make it neater, and it's not neat, it's messy, it's untidy, things are going on over here, things are going on differently over here, and I like the fact that Mike Long is always very analytical about a specific group in a specific place and says things about that specific group in that specific place and doesn't then extrapolate that to a different group and say, well, that's true there as well. I like that. I think, I think he understood complexity really well. I don't know, has a lot to teach me about it. Yeah. Understanding language learning is hard. And you really understand that from reading this book, I think. Yeah.
I think the most important things would be the free will and the creativity of the person. I think he really takes that seriously.
Yes. All of his exemplification of ideas seems to be very specific to particular groups of people, and that's helpful for understanding their needs and how language learning works for them. And I think he does that really well in this chapter by delving deep into specific industries and specific discourse communities and what their needs are and how they use language to get there. So,
Yes, and it's really good examples of ways in which things can go wrong in needs analysis, or the ways in which a certain research method can give you the information that you need, but then they're not overgeneralizing it. So yes.
I found it interesting also that he references how task-based learning is alive and well and possibly more robust outside of ELT than it is inside of ELT. And when he talks about the US military and their training programs and how task-based they are, well, of course they are. It's ridiculous to send a soldier into battle if they don't know how to fire a gun. So you have to teach them how to fire and reload a gun. You have to teach them how to operate communications devices, all of the codes that they need to use, all of the abbreviations, God forbid. So I think, it's really interesting to hear him talking about training programs that are very task-based. When we're operating within a profession that's grappling with task-based learning and thinking, oh, can we do it? How do we do it? Other industries, other professions are already doing it quite successfully. Not with language, with skills. Well, with linguistic elements, obviously, because when you learn to be a soldier or a lawyer, you learn the language of the profession. But yeah, it was just interesting to hear him talking about task-based training programs outside of ELT and how they worked.
Yeah. I think that there is less understanding of the ways in which language is used in the completion of tasks, because the task as a unit of linguistic analysis, I think, is not well understood compared to like the tasks in the US military. That's very clear.
I think needs analysis. I think understanding what people need to do with language to do a particular job is really important. And I wanted to talk about probably the most meaningful experience I've had of actually being involved in a program that does that for teachers. But I don't know whether that fits in now in the conversation, or if you want to carry on talking about chapter 6, and I'll come back to it later.
I could just have a concluding thought about chapter 6. Yeah. So he's described how research can be used and how it's essential for needs analysis within English for specific purposes.
Yes.
And I think that this approach is the right approach for students who know what job they're going to be doing or what course they're going to be doing. And it does not serve people who, like we were saying before, it doesn't serve people whose future is more open, like a 22-year-old. They've got a few months free, and they come to a language school, and because they think it will improve their prospects. or they're just learning for fun or social reasons.
There was a quote from chapter 6, which I found really interesting. It was saying that Mike Long found in his experience that the less specific you were, the less effective the learning. It seemed to me like I can't remember exactly where it was, but it seemed to me this advocation of ESP and also inherently a criticism of general English. He was saying that generally speaking, he found that the less specific you were in terms of the context that you were looking at, the less effective the needs analysis would be. I
Makes
think.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that has implications for general English classes. When we do needs analysis in general English classes, we know that we can't, if someone is applying for if someone's applying to take a course, and they have quite specific goals or needs, we know that there's going to be a limit to how we can meet them. Because there's going to be other people in the class who have different needs, and it's a kind of one size fits all, really, in that sense, and we do the best we can.
But there are other benefits to general English group courses. So there's the social environment.
Yes.
And creating that environment is really valuable.
Yeah.
And there were many examples in this very chapter about the importance of learning social communication for your job.
Yes.
So.
And people often don't think they need it. And I'm really glad that Mike Long said that students themselves are not always such a good indicator of what their needs are. I mean, we've had a week recently where I've been lucky. I've actually been able to teach some students rather than train teachers, because it's nice to have variety. And my colleague and I were teaching a Japanese learner who was quite high level, probably approaching C1.
IELTS.
An IELTS, and a student who wasn't particularly interested in taking the IELTS test, but thought that some IELTS courses actually had quite a lot of value. So he thought he'd take an IELTS course. And I like that. I mean, that showed quite a lot of savvy, because I think IELTS courses are quite good. And he said to my colleague who was teaching him, "Oh, I don't want to do any reading. I can do it at home." And I thought about Delta lessons recently and what we've been doing with reading skills development in the classroom. And I thought, oh, how little you know, you actually do need reading in class. And this is probably the only chance you're going to have a Delta tutor teaching you. So, because John, my colleague, was teaching that class, he said, he just told me he didn't want to do reading. So I switched to speaking. I thought that was a missed opportunity, considering how much reading skills development we've been doing recently. And John said, yeah, I know. I mean, because our heads have been full of, top-down processing, bottom-up processing. And it would have been very useful for that learner to take John's class on reading. But he said, no, I don't want to do reading. I can read at home. So, yeah. So Mike Long's right. Learners don't always know what they need. They know often they know what they want. Often they can articulate what they want, but they don't necessarily know what they need. And your needs analysis is much bigger, much more complicated than that. You've got to talk to so many different stakeholders to work it out. That's what I liked about this chapter, that it made needs analysis more complex.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And just much richer and just infinitely more, there's just so many ways of gathering information.
Yeah. And then it's not just something you do at the beginning, that it's an evolving process, that is something that you come back to again and again through a course. Yeah. Because on a CELTA course or a Delta course, you do your needs analysis at the beginning, and then you base everything you do on the course on that. Apart from what you monitor apart from what you observe in the classroom, informally, that might feed into your practice, but you do your needs analysis right at the beginning, and then you use that data throughout the course. but you don't necessarily add to it as much as you should.
Sorry, did you say that was on
Delta or delta. Needs analysis tends to be done very early, and then dare I say it, sometimes that the data from that needs analysis might be copied and pasted into a few assignments, and so you do assignment 1, you refer to your needs analysis and you write a few things, and then you've got assignment 3 2 weeks later, and you go back to what you wrote in assignment 1 and copy and paste what you said about the learners over, rather than thinking, oh, their needs might be a bit different now. They might have moved on. They might have a different understanding of what they need, based on.
Well, so you're saying trainees don't note new information about novels that comes up during the course?
I think it would be unfair to say that, but I think they don't always appreciate that needs analysis should be an ongoing process. They do note down and respond to new information. They monitor, they monitor and they give feedback, which is doing that. And they talk about what their learners did the day before in class. So they're definitely aware of emergent need in that sense. But I think they think of needs analysis as something formalized that you do at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it doesn't evolve, it doesn't change. It's just sitting there, and you refer to it when you need to give a justification, sort of 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, when you're writing an essay about your learners. Whereas really, you could be feeding into that original needs analysis more through more questioning, more surveys.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I wanted to talk about was a training course which Cambridge have canned, actually, called ICELT.
Right.
That's
ICELT, right?
In-service, I think it's In-Service Certificate of English Language Teaching. I think it is. I can't. As I said, I'm terrible with abbreviations and acronyms, but
I'll give you one more point for that abbreviation.
Yeah. It was a course that was extremely popular in China. It was popular in Mexico, and it was very popular in Turkey. And it was a course for non-native English speakers who were, they had to be around the B2, C1 level, but crucially slightly lower level than people who are allowed on a CELTA. And a whole module of ISEF with 4 1,000-word essays was related to language for teachers. And task 1 was to give a presentation about an article that you'd read in English and to talk about how it affects your work. Task 2 was looking at learner language and analyzing the errors and thinking about what to do about the error and how to correct it. Task 3 was and that was spoken error. Task 3 was looking at written language and talking about how correction codes and other tools could be used to help learners with their written language. And task 4 was looking at teacher language function, recording their own use of language in the classroom and finding positive use and less effective use of English, maybe because their instructions were unclear or because their language wasn't graded effectively. So the whole course, the whole module 1 of ICELT really helped teachers of lower language ability to improve their language for the job. And I found it I found the whole curriculum very descriptive of what teachers actually need to do with language to be a good teacher. So it was fascinating to be involved for so many years with that course and to watch how it helped. It definitely helped teachers progress from B2 to C1 level in the workplace. Whether it did the same in other areas of their English, I'm not so sure, but specifically in their English for the classroom, they made tremendous progress.
Was that specifically in the fourth task that you mentioned, teacher language?
I think it was all of it. I think it was all of it. I think the whole thing, just getting teachers to really think about their own language and how to make sure it's effective for doing the job is such a good teacher training module. We do a little bit of it on CELTA, we do a little bit of it on Delta, but there was a whole module dedicated to it on the iCELT. I think Mike Long would have approved of it. But I was thinking, when I was reading chapter 6, I was thinking specifically about the module 1 of iCELT and how it helps teachers of a sort of upper intermediate level to improve their own language for the classroom, which they're very motivated to do because it can lead to better job opportunities for them, and it's also helps them and it helps their students. It's just a real shame that we don't have that course anymore.
These were school teachers.
Yeah, they were school teachers. The ones I was training were in the Chinese system. They were the contract was organized through Pudong Education Bureau in Shanghai. We trained, I think, about 500 teachers over 4 or 5 years. So it was big. It was big courses. We had groups of we had 4 groups of 24, or 5 groups of 24, 5 groups of 30. Those kinds of numbers. Yeah, I just think that getting teachers to really think what English do I need to use and how do I need to speak English to do my job is a really useful question when you're doing teacher training. I really like the kind of ESP for teachers that I've been involved in, the TKT test and the iCELT module 1. They've had a very positive effect on the teachers that have studied how to use English as a teacher.
It's a shame that was discontinued.
That was discontinued at COVID. COVID was the final nail in the coffin of iCELT, but they were there. Cambridge were talking for a long time before that about getting rid of it. Numbers weren't high enough. I mean, CELTA and Delta are very popular globally. TKT is still going because that's one of the most popular Cambridge products for teachers. But iCELT was, while it was huge in Shanghai and it was huge in Mexico City as well, it wasn't so big globally. There wasn't much iCELT going on in other markets. So I think they just thought it's too small for us to continue with. Yeah. But it had a tremendous effect on teachers and their language awareness and their language ability.
Were these teachers, how experienced were these teachers?
That varied. Some of them, you had to be on an iCELT. How many hours did you have to have taught? Was it, I think it was it might have been 1,000 hours, 500 or 1,000 hours. You had to have taught for 1,000 hours.
Okay.
So how many? So yeah, our teachers do somewhere between 20 and 25 hours a week. Right?
Yes.
So so they get to 100 a month. Yeah. So I think teachers you had to have basically a year's experience, but some of the teachers had 10 years experience or 20 years experience. So it was very diverse in that sense. Just really delving into, okay, what language do I speak when I do my job? Mike Long's chapter made me think about that because it pinpointed the way language is used in specific discourse communities and how that feeds into needs analysis. And it just made me think, wow, iCELT Module 1 was a really good course for teachers because it really got them thinking about what English do I speak when I teach English,
Yes. Although, so that I think goes beyond language teaching because that's a training course, right? With some elements of language teaching. And it occurred to me while reading chapter 6 that perhaps what Long is advocating is work. And there was another example of, I believe it was medical professionals, and looking at, and I think it was another ethnographic study following medical professionals around, analyzing their needs. And the conclusion of one of these studies was that actually what's more important for non-native speakers going into working in healthcare was actually an understanding of health and medicine. So better understanding how diseases are spread. And so that would be taught in their first language.
But this is why what I'm talking about it fits in with that idea, I think, pretty well, because when you're teaching a teacher how to improve their language, you're also teaching them how to do so with some principle, with some understanding of what makes a good instruction, what makes a good response to a learner error. So you're training them and you're working on their language at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think the module 1 and the module 2 were taken at the same time, and they were very symbiotic, because the module 1 was all about how do I speak language well to do my job. And the module 2 was much more about how do I do my job well?
Yeah.
What do I need to know about correcting errors? What do I need to know about setting up tasks? So the two things fed into each other really well.
Yeah. So I think that it's not language teaching. So that's not something you can give to a language teacher. A teacher trainer needs to do that. And the same goes for the medical professional. An English teacher can't help that person. It needs to be someone who is an expert in that domain.
Oh, that's a big area. That's a really big area. I'm going to have to think more about that. I can't agree yet.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
What is a language teacher?
Yeah.
It can't just be teaching the language, because the language doesn't mean anything on its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything, for me, it doesn't mean much in course books. They're too divorced from reality for me to have much respect for them. On the job language training, embedding language learning or language teaching within something much more specific and contextualized, I think that there's a lot of value to that. I think there's an opportunity for the teacher to really embed and help learners with specific needs. And I think that our teachers can do that. And I think that it's a negotiation between the student and the teacher. The teacher learns about what the students have to do in their job, and the teacher gives them the language that they need to do it. And it's a negotiation. I like that kind of business English class where the student doesn't come to the school, the teacher goes to the company. Because the teacher becomes part of the company just for that time that they're there. I used to love going to companies in Shanghai and thinking, oh, this is where you work, and oh, you've got this poster on your wall telling you this. Oh, these are your company values written here. Oh, right, and it's kind of, it all feeds into what you're doing. It makes your teaching more contextualized.
Okay, yeah. So at least in some contexts, it's not too much to ask that a language teacher learns about the environment of the learners. They don't have to be a domain expert. Yes. Okay. That's a good point.
And I think that, also if you think about CLIL, the whole basis of it is that the teachers know enough about the subject as well as the language. It's all integrated.
Yeah.
And CLIL is extremely fashionable as a language teaching methodology at the moment. Like when you're trying to sell teacher training products in China, everybody's asking for CLIL.
Is that
asking
in secondary
for CLIL.
schools?
Secondary, primary, everybody's asking for CLIL. It's
adults.
Well, I wasn't involved in adult I was involved in training teachers who were adults, but none of them had adult students. So I don't know about that. I know about K to 12, K to 13 in China. And yeah, CLIL was incredibly popular. And I think that's because language is contextualized in CLIL, you know, and in general English, it's not. And it is in My Mom's Chapter 6. And that's what I liked about it, how specific it was to particular particular jobs, particular contexts.
Because meaning only comes from context. So he's really taking that idea as far as it can go.
Oh yeah, it's extreme. These ideas are extreme and extremely difficult to implement.
It's cool. Yeah. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, and is it all right if I say a few things about chapter 7?
Yeah, and of course. And I'll just listen, and if I think of anything interesting to add, I will. Otherwise, I'll just back channel.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, so Long in chapter 7, Long makes a distinction between discourse analysis and analysis of discourse. I think Long...
He does this a lot, and it foxes me. Have you heard of focus on form, focus on forms, and focus on the form?
You took the words out of my mouth. Yes. Yeah. So he loves it when
I'm not sure how
he loves it when there are two terms with distinct but related meanings and almost identical wording. Anyway, so discourse analysis. I'll just read a quote from page 180. Discourse analysis sets out to provide an exhaustive account of the grammar of language use in a given speech event or other domain, and to meet similar requirements to those observed in syntactic or semantic analyses of sentences. So in other words, it's a complete description of language use in a given setting.
Yes.
For example, the language of classroom lessons, and looking for patterns in the structure of interactions.
Sure.
So solicit, respond, react.
Yes.
So the teacher asks a question, student answers, and the teacher says, good. Then it would be always that order and not respond, react, solicit. And then on the other hand, analysis of discourse is a bit narrower and more specific. So it's analyzing language use in a given domain, but it's focused on a particular phenomenon or a particular task that's being done. So there was an example of a study about a speaker of Aboriginal English who had been accused of a crime. He had confessed to the crime, and there was a forensic linguist who analyzed the confession interview, noticed anomalies in the language that the person used, and essentially argued that he was saying things that a speaker of Aboriginal English would never say. So it was things like, I think, answering with auxiliaries. Yes, I did. And a speaker of Aboriginal English would never say that. And then answering too precisely. And so she used that information to build an argument that there had been a false confession.
Oh, wow.
And I think that person was then exonerated.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. So it's not analysis globally of how language works within a particular discourse setting. It's very specific to, it's more case by case analysis of discourse.
Yes, right. Well, you're focused on a particular question as opposed to a complete account of the grammar and the vocabulary in a given setting.
Right.
And then that's also related to the concept of the static or the dynamic features of a text. So looking at a text as a static example of a language would be just looking at the frequency of different vocabulary items or grammatical structures, whereas focusing on the dynamic features, you would be focused on how the language contributes to the completion of a task, which I guess, is that similar to functional language and the idea of a speech act? So if you're looking at service encounters, then you're not simply counting up all the modal verbs and saying how frequently they occur. You're looking at how modal verbs contribute to politeness to help a request be met, or So I think functional language has a key role in the task-based view of things. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it's old now, isn't it? Wilkins' functional notional syllabus. But I always thought, looking at that it was kind of a brave first attempt at making a language curriculum more task-based. So that was that idea was from the 1970s. I think it was Wilkins, the functional notional syllabus, that you could create a language course that essentially divided English into the things we do with it. So functional language has always been a huge part of TBL. And also, I think when I teach task-based learning lessons, both for students and as demonstration classes, if my lesson ends up having a language focus, the language focus often will be functional. I also think that functional language ties in extremely nicely with the lexical approach. So what Michael Lewis says about viewing language as being formed of lexical chunks that you can fit together to make meaning rather than grammar structures. I think that when I'm working with language reactively, I think I often have frames and slots rather than a structure that I'm highlighting. I think that and functional language is essentially frames and slots. Would you mind doing, saying, being, going? I wonder if you'd be, go, say, do. So it's functional language, I think, plays a huge role in TBL and in the lexical approach. You know that on Delta, functions is not in ternaria, it's just a branch of lexis.
Yeah.
Semi-fixed and fixed expressions, they call it.
Do you think that's a
what
mistake?
functions is. No, I absolutely agree with it. I absolutely agree with it.
I think
functions...
John disagrees with it.
John is a dear friend, and we disagree on most things. And we do so normally quite politely.
Right.
Yeah. I just think that if we think of English language learning as task based, what's the verb that collocates with task? A task.
Do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And functional language is about doing things with language rather than saying things with language. Yeah. So of course they're going to be linked.
So my question would be, because Long argues that task is the unit of analysis, is that the same as saying a function is a unit of analysis, or is that different?
No, because I think that would be confusing for a lot of people. I think the great thing about the task being the unit of analysis, and we've talked about this before when we did our talk about the first chapter, the great thing about using a task as the unit of analysis is that it doesn't require you to know whether your lesson is going to be a skills lesson or a language lesson. It doesn't require you to know whether your lesson is going to be a receptive skills lesson or a productive skills lesson. It doesn't require you to know whether you're going to focus on grammar, vocab, pronunciation, or discourse primarily. The starting with the task as the unit of analysis allows more freedom in terms of your reaction to student need. Whereas if you start with a function, and you say, today we're going to talk about all the language that we need to use to plan a party.
Yeah.
That's very different from saying, today we're going to plan a party.
Yeah.
If you say, today we're going to plan a party, you might end up talking about turn taking. You might end up talking about reading adverts for balloons. You could go anywhere. So TBL is much freer than functional language lessons, I think. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And it respects students' interlanguage, and it's more reactive and more open. And more, we talked about learning opportunities in the very first episode.
Oh, when we talked about Dick Allway.
Yes. Yes. And it's much more in keeping with that idea of taking all of the opportunities for learning in a lesson, as opposed to, we're going to tell you what to say and then you're going to say it, which, yes, at its worst, that's what a function as the unit of analysis would be.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't think I'd go as far as to say I disagree with Mike Long. I'm not brave enough to disagree with Mike Long, but I don't want to. I like what he has to say. But one of the things that does make me a little bit uneasy about being so specific about what people need, as he does in chapter 6, is people don't have that level of hyperfocus, right? So if you're in a class where someone has to pretty consistently perform very specific tasks, I don't think learners hyperfocus on those tasks as much as maybe he thinks they should.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's what I meant about him advocating not just for a change in what teachers do, but for a change in the culture of learning and in the very conception of learning a language. Because I think the average student, or many students, just think they need to learn the words of the language, learn the translations, and there isn't a good understanding of tasks and language being about doing tasks.
Yeah.
I think that is just because of the existing understanding of language. We understand grammar very well. So Chomsky sees language as a formal system, and he doesn't see communication as fundamental. And so I think that's had a very bad influence. So yeah, so it's interesting to think about the future. Maybe in the future that will be, maybe the task will be that, like, the idea of a task will replace grammar. Wouldn't that be cool?
It is interesting, and there are places that already do it. I can't say the name of the centre that does it. I don't think they'd want me to, but there is a CELTA centre, or a centre that provides CELTA and Delta within our organisation that has a language analysis sheet that is not a language analysis sheet, it's a task analysis sheet. So it says, what task will the learners perform in this lesson? What language will they need to complete the task? What skills will they need to complete the task? And so the analysis, the unit of analysis on their language analysis sheet is the task. And I think that's very brave in the context of CELTA. I really look up to the person who started doing that. Whose name I'm not going to mention, but I really look up to them and think that was a really brave decision. It really rocks the boat, because CELTA's very staid, it's very traditional. It wants to just carry on doing what it's been doing successfully for so long. And to rock the boat that way it's disruptive in the most positive possible sense to have a task analysis rather than a language analysis or a skills analysis. Just gives you more freedom. Gives the learners more freedom to produce language, gives the teachers more freedom to teach it.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And did you have any final words of the chapter?
Just that I think one of the greatest value of this book is that it makes everything more complicated. It doesn't try to make everything more simple. Reading this chapter was difficult for me because it talked about language use in specific domains that I don't understand very well. But the majority of learners that pass through our doors are going to go away and use English in environments that we don't understand as well as they do. And I think we always need to remember that, because our general English environment is so crystallized in these course books. It's crystallized as we learn the past simple, then we learn irregular verbs, then we learn the present perfect, how it interacts with the past simple, then we do the past continuous versus the past simple, and it's nonsense. Compared to, here are you, where are you going? What job are you going to do? Are you going to learn? Are you going to use English in that job? Oh, right. How are you going to need to use English in that job? Right. Now, what do I need to teach you? I think he's brilliant at that in this chapter. I think he really, he refocuses us on that need of learners. And that's what I took from it.
Yes.
Is that something that resonates with how you read it, or?
Very much so.
Yeah.
That's a huge contrast between any other major texts in DLT which talk about teaching and the language in much more general terms. And yeah, so that's a really good point, that he's not just giving us simple answers that we can implement tomorrow, but he is challenging us to think differently about what we're doing. And
to understand that as teachers, we always need to respect our relationship with the individual language user.
Yeah.
And that's hard when you're in a language school, because we are a bit paint by number. We are a bit one size fits all. We have to be. It's what we have. But we still have a relationship with individual language learners.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that this is a problem in education in general, not taking the individual's perspective seriously enough. So with standardized exams and compulsory education, and every child will study these subjects, regardless of what they might be interested in. And then same thing with an adult on a general English course. You are going to study these things, and we're not going to change it. We're just going to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's refreshing.
It really is. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for inviting me. It's always nice to lock horns. The idea you always say something that festers with me. The last time it was what you said about needs analysis and learners not wanting us to get them to do it. That really festered, and so I'm so glad that Mike Long came back and addressed that in this chapter, because I think that's moved my understanding forward quite a lot. And today it was what he said about
going beyond. Yeah,
teachers. A language teacher can't do what you're doing with the ISL. It's because you're training them. You're training them in knowledge and skills. You're not training them in language. I think that's something that's going to really fester. So the next time we talk, we'll have to revisit that idea. You make me think.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, likewise.
Right.
So thank you for the discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for listening, and see you next time.